far would you go to revenge if someone killed your father? If someone destroyed your city? If everything you ever loved was taken from you? David Charleston will go to any lengths to stop Steelheart, but to exact revenge in Steelheart's world, David will need the Reckoners, a shadowy group of rebels bent on maintaining justice. And it turns out that the Reckoners might just need David too. In the first of the Reckoners series, best-selling author Brandon Sanderson has written a book called Steelheart that is full of superhero fun, or rather supervillain fun, and the group of people who want to end the reign of the supervillains in charge of society. Welcome to Nerds on Words, everyone. My name is Robert, also known as Bamfing Bob, and with us again we have two wonderful panelists. First we have the wonderful Tracy. How are you doing, Tracy?
I am good, thank you, darling. I like being called wonderful.
Well, there's so many adjectives that describe you, but wonderful pretty much sums it up.
Oh, you're too kind.
I try. And again, joining us, we have David. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great. Got my coffee, and I'm ready to go.
Good deal. There's nothing better than just cracking open a book with a hot beverage and a bagel and just going for it. I had bagels, that's why I say. So we read Steelheart because I had it on my shelf for a while because I was told that Steelheart was a great superpowered / superhero book and that Brandon Sanderson is a great author. Now, David, you've read some of Brandon Sanderson's other works, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I've read Elantris, which was his introduction to being a writer in the first place. It was a one-off book, which was really good. And I've also read all of his Mistborn books, which, once we get into the pod, there are some definite similarities between the Mistborn, the first book, which is called Mistborn, and this book as well. And then I've also read some of his other stuff. He does something called Rhythmatist and Alloy of Law. So I've read a lot of Brandon Sanderson before.
Yeah, I got into a kick where I was doing a lot of writing last year, and even though my latest job, the job that I'm currently in, doesn't leave much extra time to do writing, when I did that, I actually looked online, and Brandon Sanderson is a professor at BYU for fictional writing, for creative writing, and he actually posted online semesters worth of classes where his lectures are online to teach people how to write good fiction. And I took it to heart, and I watched several of them, and he seems to know what he's doing. And after reading one of his books, I'm convinced.
You most definitely should add that to the link at the bottom for everybody who's listening. Yeah.
Absolutely. Link to his YouTube channel and his website, because there's a lot of stuff that goes from high fantasy down to this kind of young adult superhero type of novel.
And after reading his stuff, all of his different books, his different series, the one thing I have to say, even though his writing style and his ability to write is very, very good, the thing that sets him apart in my mind is his ability to create worlds and to create systems that populate those worlds. So everything I've read, his ability to create magic systems, or in this case, with Steelheart and the Reckoner series as a whole, to create a cohesive, superpowered system that works and feels real and lives in the world that he creates. He's really a master at that, in my opinion.
Yeah, world building is something that he's dedicated many classes on, because, you can say, okay, well, a girl finds a robot and, stuff happens. That's all fine and good. But why does the robot exist? In what kind of technology is it? Are robots normal, or robots, out of the ordinary? Is there magic involved? Like, there's so much to world building that he puts in. And in this series, the world building involves an event called Calamity, where many normal people suddenly become superpowered. And across the board, all of the superpowered people are villains. There are no heroes, per se. And that's really disheartening because, you know, in all the good superhero stories, you know, because we read comic books, in all the good superhero stories, you have the protagonist and the antagonist, the Joker to the Batman of all of these stories. You know, for every evil, there is something to equalize that. And in this one, there is no proper foil for the epics or the supers that are existing in the Calamity universe. And that's why the story of David is so important in this book. Because in the first chapter of Steelheart, we are introduced to this world, and David is just a young boy, and there is a supervillain who's attacking a bank. And he's going and he's zapping people with his death point. He just points at people and they turn to dust. And David's father says, no, the heroes will come save us. And then Steelheart shows, and he is Superman, right? He flies in, he comes, he stops him. But the case being that he doesn't want to stop the evil. It's that Death Point is encroaching on Steelheart's territory because Steelheart wants to be the real big bad guy. And he is, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that Steelheart was the hero in this first chapter. Did you?
Well, he was written to be that way. It was like, you know, this guy is coming in and he's going to stop this guy, you know, robbing the bank and using his powers for evil. And then it flips. And then within short sentences, it's like, oh my God, this is not what we thought it was going to be.
Right.
And I think the dramatic feeling that you get with that as a comic book reader is really profound, because the thoughts of a child looking at his father and his father saying, it's okay, the hero will save us, and realizing that there are no heroes.
But I think
except for his father.
Yeah, that plus, you know, I really want to avoid spoilers here, but I think, you know, I can imagine Brandon Sanderson sitting down to write this book, and in my mind, he had that old, you know, almost cliche saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. And he worked
great responsibility and all that kind of jazz.
And there's something going on there, you know, and I don't want to give anything away in this book or other books, but the fact that every single person that gets powers, that becomes an epic, becomes, if not the worst person, you know, if not outright evil, at least the worst version of themselves that they could be. There's something going on there.
I think that's it. I think it's how, I agree with you completely, it's how power corrupts the soul. Mm-hmm. You know, these people were normal, everyday people, and then all of a sudden something huge happened to transform them. And inevitably, the power becomes so much that they turn, and they are no longer the people that they were. And that's a very profound thing.
And then that corresponds with their weaknesses as well, because every epic in the book has a weakness, and they try so hard to keep them secret, but their weakness oftentimes ties in to a fatal personality flaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, because in that first chapter, because I think it's safe to say that first chapter spoilers are pretty much a given, right? Okay. But in that first chapter, you know, David's father, he's trying to stop Death Point from killing everyone, and so he pulls out his gun, and Steelheart swoops in, but he gets caught in the crossfire, and he ends up getting shot.
Yeah. He doesn't pull out a gun, he picks up a gun.
Right, he picks up one of the officer's guns and shoots him. Yeah. But Steelheart is completely and totally invulnerable. Nothing can touch this guy. He is the epitome of, you know, the unstoppable man. He is Superman plus in this. And the fact that a simple gun made him bleed, it kind of made a point of his weakness, but we can't figure out throughout the entire book exactly what his weakness is. You know, is it the bank? Is it the gun? Is it the situation? and they're trying to work this out because David, as he grows up, he's reached adulthood. It's 10 years later, and the entire world is just dominated by all of these evil epics. And David has been raised in the system, in factories, making power and armors for all of the enforcers who are essentially the police force run by the epics. And he has a serious vendetta against Steelheart because David's the sole survivor of the bank. He knows, and he's the only one who knows, that he is not completely invulnerable. He can be hurt.
And how shocking to me that is the part. I mean, even though Steelheart's betrayal there was shocking, the real shocking part, the one that just gripped me and was like, wow, I gotta, belt myself in for this book, was Steelheart's rage when he got hurt and realized that someone had seen him be vulnerable, and he just destroys he kills everybody, and they sink the whole bank. And this is in that first chapter. I mean, he just destroys the aid workers who come to try and help people. He kills all of them.
Right. Like, no survivors, no witnesses, buries it from existence.
And that's the thing as well about the level of corruption that this new power has given to this man. He was so he was so distraught that somebody could finally look at him and see something as a way in, that he couldn't bear it, that he literally changed the city they lived in with his rage. And that's huge. And it continues through. You see with how he surrounds himself with the people he surrounds himself with, how he progresses within the book, and the level of digging and work that David and his newfound friends have to do to find any way to get towards him, let alone his weakness. It just shows how much he was able to not only the city but himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you kind of touched on this, but the other people that he surrounds him with, because we'll get into the Reckoners here soon, because that's the bulk of the story, right? Mm-hmm. The bulk of it is how the Reckoners deal with the world. But Steelheart, there are high epics, which are your
supers,
5 mutants, right? The ones that are like top notch, you can't beat them. And there are a progressive number of epics that are lower, many of which have been killed off because they tried to rise to power and they were stopped by more powerful epics. But Steelheart has surrounded himself with several very powerful people. One of them being Nightwielder, who is in perpetual darkness. He's essentially a shadow man, and he has taken all of the sunlight away from what is known as New Chicago, because Chicago was turned to steel by Steelheart. He transmuted the entire city to steel practically, and in order to keep them in check, the Nightwielder also made it very dark, and he pulls light out of everywhere. So it makes it very difficult for anyone to, rise up in the dark. Another one is Firefight, who is your basic fire type hero, but we don't hear too much about that character until later in the book. But he's surrounded by several others, and another big one is Conflux, who can essentially share energy with things. So he powers the whole city. He makes power banks, and he makes the enforcers' suits powerful enough so that it can survive in this. The
enforcers are the non-soups.
Right, they are the stormtroopers to Steelheart's Darth Vader.
I thought Fortuity was interesting at the beginning too, which is a character you meet at the very beginning. It's how you get your intro into the Reckoners. So
yeah,
right. Fortuity is a luck-based character who has precognition.
Yeah, think male Domino for all of you who are listening. So.
I was just about to say it's a very Domino-esque character.
Right, but he doesn't take a lot of risks. He just goes to the theater and he makes assessments, and not gambling, but he he invests his money and uses his powers to get rich. But so David is out of the factories. He's on his quest to beat Steelheart, and in doing so, he has collected a ton of reconnaissance. Right, he has just notebook after notebook of information on the types of epics there are, what their powers are, what their weaknesses are, where they come from, events that have taken place, in order to boil down to what Steelheart's weakness is and how to defeat him. And in doing so, a lot of his research has involved the Reckoners. Now, the Reckoners are a group of normal, non-powered individuals who have sought out to kill epics across the separated states, what was the United States.
And that's important. They're not rebels. They're not trying to cause rebellion. They just want to kill epics. So
right, because they figure
they're
if
a
they
militia.
take it out, they'll hopefully try to quell that problem one by one.
What I found as well, though, with the Reckoners, is that people they're not the good guys either. They're not. They're there to try and get rid of something that's standing in their way, but they're not there trying to make the world better. They're just doing it because that's what they have to do.
They want to break the system and let someone else put it back together.
Exactly. And that's what's very interesting, because it's not. They normally have a bigger role to play in books like this, and then when you get one that's actually, no, these guys are just doing this because they want to get rid of the trash and then let somebody else wash up after. It's right. An interesting scenario.
Like it doesn't matter who replaces Hitler so long as Hitler's gone.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It's like, I don't have a plan after. It's just we need to make sure that the problem goes away. And once the problem is gone, we'll figure it out after that.
And when I was reading that upset me a little bit. I was like, that's kind of the coward's way out. Because, I mean, even though killing them is hard work, that's really kind of the easiest part of the job. Because replacing, this system where these people at least are living in a world that, New Chicago is replaced Chicago. At least they have a functioning system. It's not a good system, but it functions. And these people are willing to go in there and tear it all apart, but they're not willing to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, like we'll create a little bit of anarchy and then run away.
Yeah.
That's why I described them as a militia. They're not a rebel group. They are a militia. Right. And that's I think when for David as well, I think he's very aware of that fact. I don't think he idolizes them in any way. I think he knows that they are the weapons, the tools that he requires to get where he needs to be, and that is to exterminate the man who, destroyed his life.
Right, and essentially, Steelheart is the embodiment of what happened during the calamity, right? He's the worst of people. Now, granted, you just said that there are some places that don't have infrastructure, that don't have food, that they are literally struggling to get by under the epics that are in charge of places like Pittsburgh or places in California or wherever. But in Steelheart Society, because they have a kind of a hierarchy and they have the infrastructure that they need, it's livable, but it's like living.
It's not optimal, but it's livable. Yeah.
Right. It's you're not hurting for things, but you're hurting in general.
You're living in a fascist state.
Right.
Exactly.
And so when the Reckoners come to New Chicago to stop this lower level epic fortuity, David comes and intervenes and really throws the Reckoners off their game, because here is some normal guy, a kid even, coming and disrupting their plans and making it work. And David shares his information about Steelheart and the epics with the group. And over time, he is kind of pulled in to become one of them, because he has a plan saying, hey, I want to kill Steelheart. The members of the Reckoners are led by someone who's known as the Professor, and he founded the Reckoners. But there's several subsets of this Reckoners group. So this is only a subset. We might meet other ones later on in the book series, because this is a trilogy. The Reckoners is a trilogy, so we did not read the other two, but after reading this, I definitely want to. But there's Megan, who is another young member, and David finds himself very smitten with her. There's Abraham, who is I believe he's a French Canadian who is all about, guns and firepower.
He's one of my favorite characters.
He's a great character, and he is a believer that a hero will eventually come save them, and that's a notion that is essentially a wives' tale at this point, because as you were saying, if it was completely random, right? If this was a random separation of powers by the calamity, there would be good and there would be bad, right?
Yeah.
But in order for all of the superpowered people to have a darkness to them so that they would want to control or kill or whatever the case may be, that just proves that there is something more sinister at work within the powers and not just a random selection.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
There is a corruption within becoming a super. You inevitably become corrupted within.
Right. And so the idea that there can be someone out there with powers who is good, him holding out hope, is something that has been discarded. And that's something that David's father believed.
I think because it goes beyond even hope. It's a matter of faith. It's almost like a religion.
Yeah. And people just don't believe it because, if you stare the truth in the face, it's just not happening. If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. Right? Then we have, there's two others. There is a young man who believes that he is Scottish.
Cody. Yeah.
But also Australian, but also Southern, like the Southern United States.
Scottish Australian.
Irish as well at one point.
Yeah. He thinks he's a Celt.
Yeah.
I have the book here. I'll be able to find his name really quick. His name is Cody.
Yeah.
Cody, and then Tia.
And Tia, and she's the genius of the group. She does all the tech and all the research. Right? She's the brains of the operation.
Yeah, I love Tia. She reminds me, it's like she could totally be in Scooby Doo.
Yeah, she's well. So.
Right, but there's all these people who are working together to make this happen. And when David comes upon him, he says, "Look, I want to be a part of your group, but my goal is to defeat Steelheart, and that's what I want to do." And he makes his case, and they decide that they're actually going to pursue it. They figure that killing off, let's just make an analogy, right? You don't go after the Justice Society when the Justice League is right there, right? Right. Like by taking out Matter-Eating Lad, you're not really solving anything. It's someone, right? It's something that you can do, but unless you're going after the big bad, unless you're going after, Lex Luthor or something, you really don't put a dent in it.
Right.
And so Megan is completely against this, and it kind of hurts David's feelings, but because he's crushing on Megan really hard throughout. So they go in, and Megan is not for it, but everyone else seems to think that, it's business as usual. And they're going to get it done, because if they don't, then it's never going to happen.
Yeah,
but
that's the point.
But let's see, what can we include that's not super spoilery?
Basically, Megan is the kick-ass, what's the best way? She is the Lois Lane / Lana Lane / Supergirl of this comic.
Yeah, she's Spitfire, right? She has
yes.
an attitude.
And I think she has a very strong ideal of what should and shouldn't be done, and she's very sure of the road that she is on with the Reckoners and what they were doing and the way they were doing it systematically was what was right.
If you pick up this book at first and you read it and you find yourself going, I don't know about this character because, a lot of her descriptions, at least at the beginning, is David, like you say, crushing on her.
Mm-hmm.
Because Megan has layers,
Hugely.
And the more you get in the book, the more those layers are going to unfold and the more intrigued you're going to be. Want to know what is going on with her and what's going on with her and David and what's going on with this whole group.
What's the backstory to her? You want to know what has damaged her so much that this is how strong she feels about it,
Right. And she's really hard to read, right? Because sometimes she'll open up, sometimes she closes off. And, and certain gadgets they have, she just can't figure out, and no one knows why.
Yeah.
That is another thing. The gadgets in this are a big thing. The professor is apparently a super genius who has developed some technology to combat the epics, because if they didn't have help, it would have been impossible by now. So there's 3 main gadgets that he has that have been acquired with the genetic material and research of other epics. The first is the Harm's Way, which, by the way, is an awesome name. But it's essentially a healing gadget. It keeps you out of harm's way, and when you get hurt, it'll heal you. The second one is they have special jackets that, you have bulletproof vests and they stop bullets. Well, these jackets, they more create kind of a Ziploc baggie around your person, so to speak.
It's a kinetic shield.
Really. Right. By wearing it, it dissuades damage. So if you fall from a small height or if you get shot or something, it will significantly lessen the damage upon your body until it's taken too much and it breaks the barrier, right?
But I thought that was really important, and one of the greatest things that Sanderson did with that particular, widget, or whatever you want to doodad, whatever you want to call it, is that
item.
It's got limits, and that was great. Like at one point, one of the characters gets shot several times, and eventually the limit is reached, and one of the bullets breaches just enough to wound him. But it's like that's really, to me, the sign of great writing, is when you think about the limits, and those limits can be reached, and so you could, that's that part of that world building we were talking about.
Yeah.
He's putting up
integrating limits within superhero style books and writings is very, very difficult, because it's normally the lower ending humans who don't have any power, and that they're the ones that'll always get hurt. But to have something like this where he's using technology, they're using data and DNA from the past to provide these safeguards, but all they are is guards. They're not preventative measures,
right?
And it's a really, really good thing, because you see it everywhere. You got in every kind of sci-fi and every kind of fantasy, there's always some kind of impenetrable shield.
Right.
They don't have that here.
Right, because I kind of think of the Hulk, that's one thing I kind of hate about certain characters, like Superman and stuff, is that, it's so immeasurable. Like the Hulk, he's not strong enough. Just get madder. You'll get stronger, right? I like being a significant limit to it, and it having that limit really does, it helps. It helps put it in the real world.
I was just about to say that it gives it slight perspective, doesn't it, in relation to what you're reading to. We all know it's fantasy, we all know it's sci-fi, we all know it's not real. But to have that little bit of, this could be something in the future,
and
makes it exciting.
I could testify that this is something he does on a consistent basis. Hopefully someday in the future we can get back to Sanderson again, but in his Mistborn series, his whole system of quote-unquote magic is based on metals, and you have to ingest the metals, and then if you're able to use those metals to create effects, you can feel them inside of you, and you have to burn them. And so if you burn through the metals, you have to have vials of more metals to swallow, so like zinc and aluminum, and they all have different powers. And these people do that, and that's like a large part of the Mistborn series.
I still want to read that book.
Yeah. And it's really amazing. And then learning how, like, one metal allows you to push against metal, another allows you to get to pull, so you can almost fly because you can push. They'll throw metal coins on the ground and push against that metal. They'll fly up into the air and then latch onto another piece of metal, 1,000 yards away, and pull themselves through the air towards it. And you're burning metal.
If Mr. Sanderson is listening and would like to talk to us here at There's No Words or any of our other podcastings, to discuss his epic world building, we wouldn't mind. So, holler.
Yeah.
Is that the word you say over there in America? Holler.
I don't mind. I'm not shy.
Yeah.
Talk to us about stuff because these books are amazing.
Now, the final power that they have, which is the coolest of the powers and the most actively used, is something called tensors, and essentially they're power gloves that can destroy certain materials, right? So if you use it against a material, it deteriorates it. And since the entire world is steel now, this whole city's made out of steel, it is one of the most effective because you can't just cut a door into a solid block of steel.
Mm-mm.
The entire place is set, and so they can gently break away from it, and they use it both offensively and defensively because they create tunnels under the city, but also
it's not only used as a defensive measure against the supers or the epics. It's used in their daily needs, creating their infrastructure under the city for getting to where they have to get, making these rooms, everything.
But it's not a here, put it on, you can use it either. It's a skill.
Yeah, you have to learn.
Yeah. And some people are better at it than others, and I'll just leave it at that. So.
Yeah.
Right. Because David's pretty good at it. I mean, he kind of picks it up.
Sure.
But I can just say the last 2 weeks I've been working in a spring manufacturing plant where they have steel springs and they're huge and it's just covered in grime and stuff. And let me just tell you, steel, hefty shit, right? Like
just in case you didn't know, people.
Oh no, because like steel dust.
Lesson 101. Steel is hard.
Great. Steel dust is gross. It's not fun. But in the book, they try to they pick up pieces of steel and they I think there's one point where David tries to create a weapon out of some steel from the wall, like he tries to tense out a weapon.
Yeah.
And he just picks it up, and I'm just thinking that thing must weigh 300 pounds.
Yeah, no way that's happening.
Right, and that's one thing though, because the tensors themselves they create dust, but it's there's almost a magical quality to them because it's based in superpowers, where the steel itself is being transmuted, but it's at a manageable weight.
Right.
Because it's just heavy stuff, man. 500-600 pounds. I'm so tired of this job. Oh man.
What's the irony though that you're reading Steelheart and still working in a steel plant?
Yeah.
No, it really was. When I was reading the book, I was like, it's talking about all this steel dust, and I'm like, I have that stuff in my hair.
Oh wow.
It's
man, this ain't fun.
It really isn't. It's not fun at all. So
and then sounds pleasant in the book, and you're dealing with it in real life.
Right. No. And just a side note, Steelheart sounds like such a pure name, doesn't it? It sounds like
yeah.
I think Sanderson chose that name specifically because it sounds like a superhero.
It sounds like a proper badass.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You think of Braveheart, you're like, oh, Braveheart,
Yeah.
And his personality, I mean, let's be honest here, Steelheart isn't in a lot of the book,
No, and when he is, he's a douche.
That's what I was going to say, though. He looms over the book, but when he is, it's like, yeah, he's still Steelheart, but he's the worst version of a Steelheart that I could possibly imagine.
He's such a douche. He's just like, oh my god, you're just a whiny bitch.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like, once again, I can't go into it in too much detail because of spoilers, but it's like some of the stuff that he has the people in his government doing It's so just you're like you read it, and you're like, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, it's like,
Do you know what I was feeling? I was reading it. I'm like, this is like a petulant child. He's like
yeah,
a baby who threw his toys out of his pram.
yeah,
All these silly little ways that he's manipulating other people because he's just this big douche.
yeah.
It's unreal.
And he's a coward. He's scared inside.
Completely. That's why he doesn't. That's why he has minions and doesn't have the reckoning to do it himself because he knows otherwise.
Yeah.
He knows his own limitations.
And he's incredibly insecure as well, which is just
which most supervillains are.
yeah. Although, if I could go, just mention real quick on it to divert the epic that scared me the most, and maybe this is because I had a good vision of it, was Night Wielder.
Night Wielder should have been the boss.
That guy was freaky, and I used to play a role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, vampires!
Yeah, and
shout out to Tabletop Damon.
there's a vampire clan in there. God, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, and I used to play one, but they manipulate shadows like he does and make them hard and can like spear people and stuff like that, and they're so scary. And that is the kind of stuff that Night Wielder could do. I mean, imagine you're in a room or a tunnel that's dark, and anywhere a shadow could become alive, and not to mention like hundreds of shadows and lance out at you, and then suddenly become like spears and just lance through your body. And that's this guy, and it's just he's terrifying.
He was definitely I in my head I was like, why has he not taken over? He was definitely the most indulgent of the for me. I like to indulge in the bad guys sometimes, and he would be like, I would read a story just about him.
No, my issue is that he's not invulnerable as so much as he is incorporeal, right? So it's like he can't be touched, and so it's kind of hard to feel powerful when you can't lay a hand on someone. You can only use the shadows to your advantage. But what's the most sinister about Night Wielder for me was the fact that he just kept Nukago in perpetual darkness. Like, there was never a sunrise. How disheartening is it for a group of people to live in the dark for years, literally, never to see a sunrise again?
Yeah.
It's just very sad, and to keep them in that kind of environment, that's what creates more of a villainous world than even like everything being sculpted out of steel,
And I contrast him with I can't remember his name. The last book we reviewed, there was another similar type character, and it's like this is he fought against the electric-based character in the last fight.
Zap versus I can't remember his name either.
But it's like he's that guy's older brother. It's like the two of them get together.
Cut the same cloth.
Yeah, it's like, and it's like, and I remember in our last pod, I kind of talked about I wish I had seen more from that character throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
And I got it in this one, and I was like, whoa. I was like, this guy is so creepy. And, man, yeah, I don't know what it was. But,
it's the creepiness of it all.
Yeah, he really creeped me out. And the fact that, and the fights that he has with various members of the Reckoners are really, really good. So,
yes.
Right.
There are some kick-ass action sequences here in this book.
Like, and throughout, it's not just like one or two times. Like throughout, there are
throughout the book,
really great ones. But at the end, like part 4, because it's broken into 4 parts. Part 4 is just jam packed with battle scenes because, their whole goal is to go after Steelheart, and by the end of the book, that plan is trying to come to fruition, and so there's a lot of mano-a-mano fights. There's a lot of planning and going after them. And so it really does get you in. And might I just say that I made a few predictions about midway through the book, and some of them were completely off, and some of them were spot on, right? So you can't just go into it. It's not it's not entirely predictable. You know, there
No, you
are a
definitely
few
have to
real
think about this
shocks.
book. Most definitely have to think about this book.
Yeah.
You know, you can very easily get lost in it, which is a good thing. But you need to pay attention because subtle little things that are dropped in in part 1 and part 3 really, really tie in part 4.
Yeah.
And just these tiny little Easter eggs. You know, we all love a little Easter egg. So
Right, like little foreshadowing, and it's just like a little asides, right? Things that you don't really think about at the time, but in retrospect, kind of thinking about it, you're like, oh, well, that's why that was included.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you tricky bastard, you got me again.
Like, damn.
One of the other things I really like about the whole arc of the book is the fact that Sanderson lets his bad guys be smart as well.
Yeah.
They're
all Lex Luthor, like they're all on that level.
They are making their own plans and reacting to the stuff that is going on in their city as the Reckoners are making their plans, trying to take them down. And so they're going back and forth. And throughout the whole book, there are losses and victories and losses for both sides.
Oh, absolutely. And this book particularly, because I just thought, oh, well, I'll read the one and be done with it, because, you know, doing a book podcast, you want to have as much variety as possible. But this is one of those series that leaves you on such a cliffhanger that
you have to get the next one.
You have to read the next one. It builds up, and it's like, oh, did you enjoy the book? Well, there's too many questions now, and you have to read the next one. You know, you have to.
And when you guys read it, make sure one of your friends read it too, so that you can sit down and be, where are you in the book? So that you can have these conversations.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to be very careful and not spoiling too much of it, but you will want to discuss in detail a lot of things.
I'm definitely going to get the next one, Firefight, so that I can continue it.
I thought the exact same thing. Once I finished this, I was like, well, now I know what my next series that I'm going to have to read completely.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler at all, but one of the things you're going to take away from this book is you're going to ask yourself, what the heck is Calamity? And what gave these people's powers, and what is going on? What is going on with all this?
What the F is going on?
Right. And considering that the third book in the series, the final one of the trilogy, is called Calamity, I'm pretty sure that the next one is going to handle Firefight and their role in it all, because, like I said, this book, it doesn't really touch on that character, but, you know, they're more significant than one would assume. And so the second book really kind of dives into what they have going on, but the third one's called Calamity, and I think that's really going to give us all the answers that we've been wanting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So we've discussed the plot, we've discussed the characters, we've discussed everything we've loved. What would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10, Tracy?
I would give it a solid 9.
Got a lot for you. Was there anything that wouldn't make this a 10?
The only thing that didn't make it a 10 was for me, there was a couple of very easily read things that I knew that what was coming up. But then he'd hit me with something and it was totally not what I thought, like yourself. So that's the only reason I would put it at a 10, as a 9 rather than 10.
Fair enough. What about you, David?
I am going to give it an 8.5. And the reason I give it an 8.5 is it's a little... There were two things. One was with the book, is that the final resolution on with Steelheart, I was just a little bit disappointed. Not disappointed, but I was like, I wish there had been more. That was one. And the second thing was, and this is cheating, I've read so many of other Brandon Sanderson's books that I saw a lot of, not a lot, but some similarities with how he constructs his books. And so I'm so familiar with his writing style and what he does that it felt very familiar in that sense. That said, for everyone listening to this, it's for me, 8.5 is really good, and I'm just being a critic right now. It's a great book.
It's the same for me. A 9 is a big jump for me to give a book.
Right, you've been giving 6s and 7s.
I have.
Um,
because I am a bitch like that.
No, you just have class. You know what you like.
Thank you.
So I enjoyed this thoroughly, but I'm being a little bit of a critic right now. I want everyone to understand that. And an 8.5 is a very good. It was a very good book. You know, for I don't know what a book would get a 10. So.
Yeah. For me, I was gonna give it an 8, but after discussing it, I think 8.5 or 9 is actually probably where I'm at, because one of my big issues is I'm a superhero fan. Like, villains make the story, but heroes make you come back. Mm-hmm. And in this one, they're like these superheroes. They don't have superpowers. They're kind of gifted them through these technology pieces. And so, like, for me, like, I kind of like the idea of, like, what if one of these epics was a superhero rather than a villain, and there's just like one central character. But the fact that Brandon Sanderson was able to make a book about, like, a superhero book, quote unquote, with no superheroes in it,
right?
Yep,
is just
mind blowing,
next level brilliant.
Yeah,
it's testament to how good he is, really.
Right, like because when I read it, I thought Steelheart was going to be the big superhero, and everything was going to be, you know,
amazing, and it was going to work, and he was going to save the world.
Right. It was going to be Zod versus Superman, right? And it was just going to be big battles.
And I was like, no, that's not happening.
No, the entire time these Reckoners, they're being held down by a steel thumb. And it's like every turn, every time they take one step forward, it's 2 steps back. And just having that story be compelling, and you're rooting for them even though you know that the odds are against them, that's what made it good. So I would say overall, we can agree that this is about an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10.
Definitely.
And it is a highly recommendable book.
Question for both of you real quick is, like, did both of you also really internalize and feel the emotion of just how dangerous and how scary it would be to live as a Reckoner in this world?
Oh, in today's society. Yep.
Yeah, like, for me, you know, it's one of those things where you're an ant in a world full of grasshoppers, you know? It's like you can't...
Oh, I love that. I love the reference.
But, you know, there's no winning here, you know?
No, there isn't.
And you would have to have something truly special and unique to be able to overcome it, and 99 point some odd % of the people have zero shot at doing it. They are subservient with no chance of redemption. And these Reckoners, they are that percentage of 1% that actually can do something about it and are doing something about it. So, you know, as Tracy was saying, you know, that responsibility, that power, you have to fulfill your responsibility to try to make it a better place, even if your odds are pretty low.
Pretty low, yeah.
But yeah, so everyone, I will provide links to Brandon Sanderson's sites, YouTube channels, books in the description. And for next month, we don't know exactly what we're going to be reading, but I will be putting out a poll of several books, 3 to 4 books that we were thinking about. One of them being the sequel to Renegades that we reviewed several months ago, last year. So it'd be Arch Enemies. There's another one called A City Stained Red. Also, Midnight Children, which is kind of a superpowered Indian thing, as far as I know, from what you say. And then one recommended by Tracy, which I still haven't decided yet, but there's a couple of good choices.
I have a couple of entries that might go in there, but you know, they're quirky like me, so you can understand.
So we're gonna put those out in a poll on Twitter, probably a 3-day poll as soon as we're done recording this, and I look forward to your input, because what you choose is what we'll read. So please vote on that poll and follow us on Nerds on Words on Twitter, as well as the Undercutter Capes podcast networks on Twitter. Go to comiccrusaders.com for all of your best indie reviews, comics, toys, everything you might want. You can find it there. And the people,
everything your little geeky heart requires is totally there.
Right, because the people who do it are truly We truly love it. We are fans doing it, but not for money, not for any sort of recognition, but just because we enjoy sharing that with the world.
There might be some reviews of D&D books coming out pretty soon as well. So.
Oh, and if we're shouting stuff out, me and my wife have a movie podcast called Real Romance, and this upcoming weekend, I know it's not a romance movie, but it's because we love movies and we love each other. We are going to be reviewing Captain Marvel. We're going Thursday night, and so this upcoming weekend, the second weekend in March, we will be putting out a review of Captain Marvel and several other movies that have come out in the last couple weeks. So if y'all are interested in that, please just come on, check it out. We'd love to see you.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay, so until then, I'm Bamfing Bob. This has been David and Tracy for Nerds on Words. Just remember to keep on reading, stay nerdy, and join us next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.